It was a night like any other, or so they thought. Jack, Mia, Claire and Ryan, 4 friends bound by an insatiable thirst for adventure, stood at the rusted gates of the Abandoned Carnival. A dare had been made, whispered under the pale glow of the moon, a challenge to spend a night within the forgotten grounds of the carnival. The air was heavy with the promise of rain and something more, an unsettling stillness that sent shivers crawling down their spines. The carnival loomed before them, a skeletal silhouette against the stormy sky. The wind howled through the broken Ferris wheel, its vacant carriages creaking like the bones of a long-dead beast. The peeling paint on the crooked sign above the entrance seemed to whisper a warning. Turn back while you still can. But the allure of the unknown, the intoxicating thrill of fear, was too strong to resist. With a shared look of nervous excitement, they stepped across the threshold and into the carnival's decaying embrace. The carnival smelled of rain and rot, the air thick with the silence of the grave. Each footstep on the overgrown pathways crunched with the brittle remnants of fallen leaves and forgotten dreams. The moon painted the dilapidated attractions in shades of grey and black, casting long, dancing shadows that seemed to writhe and twist with a life of their own. They pressed onward, deeper into the heart of the forgotten playground, their laughter, a feeble attempt to break the suffocating tension, echoing unnaturally in the stillness. There was a palpable sense of history here, a time capsule of laughter and screams, now buried beneath layers of dust and decay. It was as though the carnival itself was holding its breath, waiting, watching their every move with unseen eyes. As they ventured deeper, the first raindrops began to fall, heavy and cold, like tears from the heavens mourning the carnival's demise. They sought shelter under the skeletal frame of a once grand entrance arch, its faded paint barely clinging to the rotting wood. From this vantage point, they surveyed their surroundings, their hearts pounding in unison with the rhythm of the approaching storm.
So much for a night of fun,
Mia said, her voice tight with forced cheer. She nervously adjusted her backpack strap, her gaze darting around the desolate landscape.
Relax, Mia. It's just an old carnival. What could possibly happen?
Ryan chuckled, his bravado doing little to mask the tremor in his voice. As if on cue, a gust of wind swept through the grounds, carrying with it the faint, haunting melody of a Calliope. The sound, distorted and mournful, seemed to seep from the very walls of the carnival, sending a shiver down their spines. The music was distant, yet close, weaving its way through the crumbling structures, a spectral echo of laughter long silenced.
"Did you hear that?"
Claire whispered, her eyes wide with apprehension. Ignoring her question, Jack, ever the pragmatist, pulled out his phone.
No signal, of course, just great. We're trapped in a horror movie cliché with a dead phone.
There's something out there,
Amir whispered, her eyes fixed on a shadowy figure that seemed to flit between the decaying stalls. The figure, tall and slender, moved with an unsettling fluidity like smoke given form.
Oh, come on, Mia. You're letting your imagination run wild.
But even as he spoke, the faintest hint of doubt crept into his voice. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, their every move scrutinized by unseen eyes. The carnival, once a place of joy and wonder, now felt like a hunting ground, and they were the prey. The rain intensified, the wind howling like a banshee through the skeletal remains of the carnival. The temperature plummeted, the air growing heavy with a bone-chilling dampness that seeped into their clothes and chilled them to the core. They pressed closer together, seeking comfort in their shared fear, their breath forming white plumes in the frigid air.
"You know, they say this place is haunted."
Haunted by what?
Ryan asked, attempting a nonchalant tone that failed to mask the tremor in his voice.
"The Laughing Man."
The Laughing Man sounds like a bad joke.
"It's no joke. Legend has it that a man, a performer here, went mad. They say he wore a twisted grin and carried a long, sharp hook. He lured children into the shadows and no one ever saw them again."
That's just a story, Claire.
Mia said, trying to sound reassuring but failing miserably.
"Maybe. Or maybe it's a warning."
A sudden gust of wind tore through the decrepit archway, ripping a piece of rotting wood from its frame and sending it crashing to the ground with a deafening crack. The friends jumped back, their hearts pounding in their chests. The wind seemed to carry with it a voice, a faint whisper that sent shivers down their spines. "Beware the laughing man." The rain showed no signs of abating. In fact, it seemed to be growing stronger, as if the heavens themselves were weeping for the carnival's tragic fate. The friends, soaked to the bone and shivering uncontrollably, decided to seek refuge in the only structure that seemed even remotely sound: the carousel. The carousel, a once magnificent spectacle of color and light, now stood as a haunting reminder of the carnival's glorious past. Its once vibrant paint was now faded and peeling, revealing the rotting wood beneath. The golden horses, frozen in mid-gallop, seemed to stare at them with vacant eyes, their painted smiles twisted into grotesque parodies of joy. The air inside was thick with the smell of mildew and decay, the silence broken only by the steady drip, drip, drip of rainwater seeping through the roof.
This place is creepy.
Mia whispered, her voice barely audible above the pounding of her own heart.
Tell me about it.
Ryan muttered, his eyes scanning the shadows that danced around the perimeter of the carousel. Suddenly, the Calliope music started again, this time closer, louder, more insistent. It was a chaotic melody, a discordant symphony of joy and terror that seemed to reverberate through their very bones. The horses on the carousel seemed to tremble, their painted eyes glinting ominously in the gloom.
What's happening?
Claire whimpered, clutching at Jack's arm.
I don't know, but I don't like it.
The music swelled, reaching a fever pitch, and the carousel shuddered. The friends watched in horror as the platform began to slowly rotate, the horses rising and falling in their eternal silent gallop. The air grew heavy, charged with an unseen energy, and the shadows around them seemed to writhe and twist with newfound life. Panic surged through the group. The carousel was moving slowly at first, then faster and faster, the haunting melody of the Calliope driving them mad.
The horses! They're watching us!
The horses spun, their painted eyes seeming to follow their every move, their once cheerful expressions now twisted into grotesque masks of malice.
We have to get off this thing.
Ryan shouted, his voice barely audible above the din. They stumbled towards the edge of the rotating platform, their legs heavy, their movements clumsy and uncoordinated. The world spun around them, a dizzying blur of decaying grandeur and encroaching darkness.
Keep moving, we're almost there.
As they reached the edge, a figure emerged from the shadows, a tall, skeletal silhouette silhouetted against the flickering lights of the carousel. The figure was tall and gaunt, dressed in what appeared to be a tattered ringmaster's uniform. Its face was hidden in the shadows, but they could hear its laughter, a high-pitched, chilling cackle that seemed to echo the mournful wail of the Calliope.
Who is that?
The figure raised its hand, and the carousel lurched to a halt. They were frozen in place, trapped between the skeletal horses and the looming figure. The air crackled with tension, the silence broken only by the dripping water and the ragged breaths of the terrified friends.
Welcome to the show.
The figure took a step closer, and they could see its face, illuminated by a flash of lightning. It was a mask, a grotesque caricature of a human face, frozen in a wide, maniacal grin. The eyes were empty sockets, reflecting the flickering lights of the carousel like pools of liquid darkness.
Stay back!
The figure took another step, and another, its laughter growing louder, echoing through the decaying structure.
What? What do you want from us?
The friends were frozen in terror, their faces illuminated by the flickering lights of the carousel as the shadowy figure closed in. Driven by a primal instinct to survive, Jack grabbed Mia's hand and they bolted. They scrambled off the carousel and into the labyrinthine maze of cracked mirrors that formed the entrance to the funhouse. Behind them, They could hear Ryan and Claire's screams, their voices swallowed by the cacophony of the Calliope and the maniacal laughter of the approaching figure. They ran blindly, the ground uneven beneath their feet, the air thick with the smell of dust and decay. The mirrors reflected their terror back at them, distorted and magnified, 1,000 frightened faces staring back from the darkness. The laughter echoed around them, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere at once.
This way.
Jack shouted, pulling Mia down a narrow corridor lined with mirrors. They stumbled through the darkness, the mirrors reflecting their every move, creating a disorienting hall of illusions. They could hear the figure closing in, its laughter echoing off the glass, each chilling cackle drawing closer. Suddenly, Ryan appeared in front of them, his face contorted in terror, his eyes wide with a primal fear that sent a chill down their spines. He reached out to them, his hand grasping at empty air, his mouth open in a silent scream. And then, just as quickly as he appeared, he was gone, vanished into thin air, swallowed by the darkness and the mirrors.
Ryan!
Mia screamed, her voice raw with terror. But there was no answer, only the echo of her own voice bouncing off the cold, unyielding glass. Panic threatened to consume them. The laughter continued, relentless, mocking, fueling their terror. They were trapped in a nightmare, hunted by something they couldn't see, couldn't understand. The air grew colder, the shadows deeper. The figure was toying with them, herding them deeper into its lair. They stumbled through the funhouse, their breath catching in their throats, their hearts pounding against their ribs like trapped birds.
Claire?
Jack called out, his voice hoarse with fear. But there was no answer, only the echo of his own voice and the ever-present mocking laughter. They rounded a corner and found themselves facing a wall of mirrors, their reflections staring back at them, pale and terrified. And then the mirrors rippled, the reflections distorted, and Claire appeared, trapped within the glass. She pounded on the surface, her face contorted in terror, her voice a muffled scream.
Help me, he's got me, the laughing man.
The laughter grew louder, closer, and the temperature plummeted. A cold wind whipped through the funhouse, extinguishing the few remaining lights and plunging them into darkness. And then they saw him. He emerged from the darkness, a tall, skeletal figure clad in a tattered ringmaster's uniform, his face obscured by a grotesque, grinning mask. The mask was a masterpiece of madness, a frozen caricature of mirth, the eyes empty sockets that seemed to burn with an unholy light. In his hand he held a long, curved hook, its metal glinting ominously in the darkness.
Let her go!
Jack shouted, his voice echoing through the funhouse. But the figure just laughed, a high-pitched, chilling sound that sent shivers down their spines. The figure reached out, its gloved hand closing around Claire's throat. She thrashed against the glass, her face contorted in a silent scream, her eyes wide with terror, and then, with a final agonizing shriek, she was gone, pulled through the mirror, swallowed by the darkness and the laughter. Terror lent them speed. They didn't waste time looking back, didn't dare to see if the laughing man was following. They ran, blindly, desperately through the funhouse, their lungs burning, their legs screaming for respite. The laughter echoed behind them, urging them onward, a symphony of madness that fueled their flight. They burst out of the funhouse and into the relative safety of the open carnival grounds. The storm raged around them, the wind whipping their hair, the rain stinging their eyes. They didn't slow down, couldn't slow down, not while the sound of the Calliope and the echo of that chilling laughter still rang in their ears. They ran past the skeletal Ferris wheel, its carriages swaying menacingly in the wind, past the decaying stalls and the silent rides, their shadows stretching out before them, long and distorted in the flickering moonlight. They didn't stop running until they reached the rusted gates of the carnival, the only barrier between them and the outside world. The gates were locked, of course. Panic surged through them, cold and sharp. They rattled the bars, their cries for help lost in the howling wind and the relentless pounding of the rain. And then they heard it, Again, the laughter, closer now, echoing through the deserted carnival grounds. They turned, their blood turning to ice in their veins. He was standing there, just beyond the gates, the laughing man, his skeletal form silhouetted against the storm clouds, his grotesque mask illuminated by a flash of lightning. He raised his hand, and in it they saw the glint of metal, the cruel curve of his hook. Desperation lent them strength. They threw themselves against the gates again, and this time, with a groan of rusted metal, they gave way. They tumbled through the opening, scrambling to their feet, not daring to look back, not daring to believe they were safe. They didn't stop running until they reached the highway, their lungs burning, their legs heavy. They flagged down a passing truck driver, their words tumbling over each other in their haste to escape the nightmare. The driver, a burly man with kind eyes, didn't question their disheveled appearance or their frantic story. He just ushered them into his cab and drove them away from the abandoned carnival, away from the storm, away from the horror. The police were called, but their search of the carnival yielded nothing. No sign of the laughing man, no trace of Claire, no explanation for the strange events of that night. The carnival remained standing, a silent monument to their terror, a grim reminder of the night they lost their friends to the darkness. Jack couldn't escape the memory of that night. He could still hear the haunting melody of the Calliope, the echo of the laughing man's chilling cackle. He could still see Claire's terrified face pressed against the glass, hear her muffled screams for help. The nightmare clung to him, a shadow that followed him wherever he went. And what of Mia? She had escaped with him, but something about her seemed different. Her laughter was too high, her smile too wide, her eyes holding a distant, haunted look. Sometimes late at night, when the wind howled and the rain beat against his window, Jack could swear he heard the faint echo of a calliope, and a woman's laughter, high and clear and utterly chilling.